Okay, so welcome to everyone who just connected. I hope everything is okay on your side. If somebody still wants to quickly test their audio or their video, be my guest. But I believe that we are all set and ready for this great webinar. So I'm going to give the floor to our wonderful director, Marlène Siméon, for some introduction, and we'll see how everything goes. Thank you, Marlène.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on localizing the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. It is in fact PLATFORMA's 5th edition of a cycle of webinars that we have been organizing since spring this year, actually. You have interpretation in French and English and Spanish. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us from across the world. We received registrations from across Europe, but also from the United States, New York, Latin America, from Buenos Aires, Israel and Africa, Nutu district in South Africa, among several others. So that's amazing for us. Thank you very much. So beyond the particular and virtual formats of this year's events, this webinar is also taking place in a particular setting. From an international perspective, we are linking it up with the UN High-Level Political Forum, which started last week and will end on Friday. From the EU perspective, the EU Council just adopted 2 days ago conclusions, setting out the EU's priorities at the 75 General Assembly of the United Nations, which will take place in September under the theme championing multilateralism and a strong and effective UN that delivers for all. In these conclusions, the Council stresses that, as demonstrated by the outbreak of COVID-19, multilateral cooperation is more necessary than ever. And international solidarity and cooperation must be strengthened. This webinar aims to contribute to this statement by highlighting the key role that city-to-city and region-to-region development cooperation or decentralized cooperation plays to achieve the Council's ambitions and the 2030 Agenda together from the bottom up. Finally, from a more internal PLATFORMA perspective, we are delighted today, together with the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, to launch the 3rd edition of our study on the localization of the SDGs, entitled this year, the 2030 Agenda through the eyes of local and regional governments associations. It is a study conducted with a great input from our partners and members, several of whom are joining us today. A warm thank you again for your contribution. So the study gathers updated data on how local and regional governments associations are currently advancing and accelerating the process of SDG localizations with municipalities and regions. This is focusing on Europe, but also on the relations European local and regional governments have with their peers in partner countries and how they work together to achieve the 2030 Agenda. Clear progress is seen in several areas, which is great news. For instance, did you know that in 2020, out of 34 respondents, 82% are aware of and make reference to the SDGs compared to only 31% in 2019. So 16 local and regional governments associations have indicated that the SDGs encourage their members to reach out to peers beyond European borders and to develop or enhance decentralized cooperation activities. We also note, however, that some roadblocks continue to persist. And it will be interesting also to focus on them today. Yet these challenges can find solutions when shared with peers across the world. The COVID-19 pandemic and the surge of acts of solidarity and increased exchanges of practices and knowledge across borders has proven this point now more than ever. We invite you to read this publication. So the link will be put in the chat, and we will also share it with you by mail after the webinar. So we can have also hard copy for those interested. So PLATFORMA has been putting the SDGs at the core of its activities since the launch of the agenda in 2015 with many other partners in the Global Task Force with UCLG and many others. We are in particular advocating the EU institutions so that whatever the more specific priorities of DEVCO, the 2030 agenda and its 17 SDGs remain the bedrock of the European Commission's international action. Our partners are also continuously innovating, co-creating, and surprising us with amazing experiences that can and are being replicated across Europe and the globe. So this webinar today aims to showcase a couple of key examples to continue encouraging the exchanges and to spark curiosity for those who are new today to the network. So welcome and have a nice webinar. I will now give the floor to Sarah to moderate the debate, and I wish you all a great discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marlène. And so, as I mentioned, a warm welcome to all the great participants today. It's a very busy week. It has been a very busy spring and beginning of summer with the high-level political forum, which started just last week also. I hope that you're all looking forward to summer breaks, well-deserved summer breaks very soon. I know that I am. So before we actually listen to our distinguished panelists, I have some basic house rules, and I know that you all know them probably by heart by now, but it never hurts to remind. Please mute yourself when you are not speaking so that we avoid background noises. Do not hesitate to ask any questions in the chat. We have a bunch of colleagues helping out with this, and I'm very grateful to them all. And also, when you wish to speak, please click the raise your hand button, which is also in the dashboard, and I believe next to your name on the list. Don't hesitate to also indicate in the chat if you wish to take the floor, and my colleagues and myself will take note of it and give you the floor when appropriate. Interpretation is available, as mentioned. If anyone has any issues, let us know also in the chat, and we will be happy to help. So now I'm going to move on to our panelists, and I'm going to start with the West Coast of the United Nations, Ms. Astra Bonini. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from the UN. You are the Senior Sustainable Development Officer at UN DESA, so the United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs, and you work specifically on the SDGs. So I am delighted to have you here, especially since for the first time ever, UN DESA started organizing an online consultation process with local and regional governments this year to focus on the thematic review of bolstering local action to accelerate implementation for the United Nations High-Level Political Forum. And I'm very grateful, and I was very happy to contribute to this experience on behalf of PLATFORMA and CEMR to this consultation process. So on your side and from UN DESA's perspective, how was your experience of consultation with local and regional governments, and how do you see their role evolving actually within the whole international process of SDG implementation? So Astra, I give you the floor now for roughly 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Astra? Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you to Marlène and thank you to PLATFORMA for organizing this event at the timing of the high-level political forum. And congratulations also on the report that you've just launched, and I look forward to reading that. Just from UN DESA's perspective, I want to take this opportunity to first give a little bit of background on the theme and preparations for the HLPF this year, and also to highlight some of the discussions that have been taking place so far at the forum around local action and how it can help to build back better in the context of COVID-19 and also accelerate progress towards the SDGs. For those of you who aren't intimately familiar with the HLPF, the theme for the 2020 High-Level Political Forum is Accelerated Action and Transformative Pathways, Realizing the Decade of Action and Delivery for Sustainable Development. And this theme reflects the need for more integrated approaches to the SDGs, including in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. Just to provide a little bit of background on how this theme was determined, there was an SDG summit in September of 2019 and a political declaration that came out of this summit, also building on the Global Sustainable Development Report that was presented at the summit. So the GSDR, the Global Sustainable Development Report, is a report that's written by 15 independent scientists, and they are nominated by the UN member states and appointed by the UN Secretary General. And the report is published every 4 years and presented at the SDG Summit. The purpose of the report is to strengthen the science policy interface, which is seen as necessary for informing action toward the SDGs. So in 2019, I just want to give a few of the key messages from the report, because these really inform the thematic reviews that took place for the HLPF and the actions that are being recommended coming out of the discussions at the HLPF and the reviews. 3 key messages that really stood out from the report. First is that even before the COVID-19 crisis hit the world, we were off track to meet the SDGs in some very critical areas, notably inequality and climate action and protection of biodiversity and ecosystems. So trends, even before COVID, were going in the wrong direction in these areas, and progress was too slow in some of the other important areas. A second key message is that because action toward any single goal can generate synergies and or generate trade-offs with other goals, actions really have to take into account interlinkages across the 2030 agenda, and action should aim to mitigate these trade-offs and build synergies. So intervening, for example, to strengthen food security and overcome poor nutrition can also have implications for greenhouse gas emissions, water use, land use. So actions need to take into account these potential trade-offs that are happening with actions toward individual SDGs. And finally, the report identified 6 key entry points where actions were seen to really be able to generate significant synergies and lead to transformative change. And I'll get into details on what those 6 entry points were, because they relate to the areas that the HLPF looked at in depth through 6 thematic sessions, where discussions were aligned with the 6 GSDR entry points and were informed by the political declaration priorities. The individual SDGs were also aligned with each session so that each SDG was given some attention through the discussions. And these 6 areas were advancing human well-being, ending hunger and achieving food security for all, protecting the planet and building resilience, ensuring access to sustainable energy, sharing economic benefits, and last but certainly not least in the context of this discussion and across all of the other entry points, bolstering local action to accelerate implementation. So also just to go over a little bit of the preparation for the HLPF, which Sarah indicated and was gratefully involved in. In normal years, our offices organize face-to-face expert group meetings to prepare for the HLPF reviews. And these preparations bring together a multi-stakeholder group to discuss what the key challenges and possibilities for action are around different goals. So this year, in light of COVID-19, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs carried out virtual consultations where we brought together experts, again, from different stakeholder groups within and outside the UN system to answer a set of targeted questions for each of these 6 thematic areas that are included in the HLPF program. We really had a successful event, especially given that this was a wholly new approach to reviewing the progress around the themes covered in the HLPF. Each consultation was led by DESA and co-convened with 2 or 3 other UN entities, so there was a cross-agency collaboration. And they engaged in total about 180 outside experts from academia, civil society, and international institutions, around 25 to 35 experts per theme. and then 40 UN entities, 8 to 21 per theme. So we really had a wide coverage from different perspectives and different areas of expertise that enriched the review and brought in key elements that might not have been captured otherwise. Each consultation produced a 10 to 15 page background note, and these notes cover stock taking of trends and progress that are made in each of these areas. They look at the COVID-19 crisis and how it's impacting in each area and how response efforts can help to build back better, and also policies and partnerships that can be used to drive transformations in the decade of action. And finally, the means of implementation for taking these steps, including science and technology and innovation, and also looking at multi-stakeholder partnerships and how these are developing and can support action in each of these 6 areas. The notes have been received very well by member states and other stakeholders and have really served to inform discussions, especially last week, the first week of the HLPF, that looked at these thematic areas. It was a very effective way to break down silos that sometimes stand in the way of taking an interlinked approach to the SDGs, and to generate dialogue among diverse stakeholders about how to take actions that cut across the 2030 agenda. So let me finally just touch on some of the key messages that came out of the thematic review on bolstering local action to accelerate SDG implementation, and how local action is emphasized in other thematic areas of the HLPF. First, to say that the session on local action really highlighted the critical role that local and regional governments are playing, both to provide emergency services and to help build back better in the context of the COVID-19 crisis from a longer term perspective. And we know that COVID-19 has really brought unprecedented challenges to cities and regions, including pressure on health and social care, on education systems, on emergency management structures, transport, food and safety systems. And then the pandemic has also exacerbated vulnerabilities and inequalities, particularly among those who lack access to adequate housing and basic services, those living in slum communities, who also face high exposure to additional hazards, including climate hazards and higher levels of pollution. So COVID has really revealed both the actors that we need to rely on to tackle these issues and how they're impacting different groups and different areas. Second,
Astra?
the COVID-19 pandemic has really highlighted the important role of local and regional governments. Yes. Can you hear me okay?
It's starting to break down a little. I'm sorry. But it's getting better. So I don't know on your side if you can still hear me also. I think we're losing you. I'm so sorry.
I'm going to turn off my, yes, I can hear you. I'm going to turn off my video just in case that's interrupting.
Okay,
Can you hear me okay now?
It's better now. Thank you. I'm sorry. We're talking from a big distance right now. You're in the West Coast. I'm in Brussels, okay. So it's for sure not easy. But thank you.
Yeah.
Astra, I think we're losing you completely. Maybe.
Yes, can you hear me?
No, I'm sorry. I think it's breaking down. Okay? I'm sorry. How about we give it maybe a few minutes rest, and then when we will go into a short question and answer, you can provide some additional inputs if your sound works better, if that's okay for you?
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Astra. I'm sorry, but I think it will get better. But right now it's a bit complicated also for the interpreters. But thank you so much. And thank you also very much for highlighting the beginning of your presentation, the importance of policy coherence for development, which is something that the report that you were talking about highlighted also with the trade-offs, which is something that is very key and important to the SDGs and the implementation of the SDGs.
Yes, so, I can hear you. I'm going to turn off my video. Okay.
And then now on my side, I am going to give the floor to our next distinguished speaker. We will move to the European Commission this time, to Paolo Ciccarelli from Brussels, I think. He is the head of the European Commission DG DEVCO's unit on cities, local authorities, digitalization and infrastructure. Thank you for joining us, Paolo, today. You will provide us with the perspective of the European Commission on SDG localization. Sorry. So, Paolo, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes also. Are you connected? Is everything okay on your side?
Yes, I think you can hear me now, no?
Perfect. Thank you, Paolo. Welcome.
So thank you, Sarah. I think that after many years, you still don't spell my name correctly, which is Ciccarelli. But
my apologies. My apologies. Yes, it will be my summer lesson.
So anyway, good afternoon or good morning to everybody, wherever you are connected. I'm very glad to be here, and thank you to PLATFORMA for the invitation. And by the way, congratulations for the report that you are publishing. I think very soon, unless you did it already in these last days. But I think it's coming back. It's coming out these days, no?
Today, it's launched today. Thank you.
Today, yes, good. So when we go to the European Commission, of course, you know very well that we have been in the forefront to support the local authorities and their association since many years. At the moment, our work is framed by a communication that was published in 2013, and a communication that is very important because it frames the local authorities not only as a service providers, but also as actor of governance. Of course, this is very important when we establish the link with the SDG. We know, we said many times that for the achievement of the Agenda 2030, the achievement of SDG can only be done with a strong local component. So just to say that following this communication in 2013, we put in place a 7-year plan for 2014-2020 that is just finishing, and we will have another one starting from 2021. But in the past 7 years, basically, we finance up to 1 billion euros for actions in support of local authorities or in let's say, working together with the local authorities. This has been done working with specific budget lines, but also, and most of, I would say most of it has been going through bilateral program at national levels, including a lot of work that we did on decentralization, working with also national government to establish a good decentralization policy in the different countries. Now, with this, let's say 1 billion, I would like to mention that big part of this money went to support the local authorities in delivering on SDGs, especially on providing services. And basically, this is a recognition that the local and regional government play a very important role at the level of decision-making and implementers. I would like, for example, to remind that we launched more specifically 2 calls for city partnerships between cities in the EU and cities in partner countries for a total of about 165 million. The first part of the call, we already reached the signature of partnerships, while the second one, we are still in the phase of evaluation. But I have to say that from these 2 calls, we got really a very strong participation of local authorities, And in particular, we also open the call more specifically to towns in order to work also with the smaller cities and with the really small, let's say, reality that are working along the territory. I mentioned this call because within this call we are trying to build a little bit a framework where we are trying also to create something that is about knowledge sharing, about monitoring the result, considering, let's say, a clear result framework. And we are working together with the OECD to put together this result framework that will help us to somehow to monitor the indicators and monitor the actions that are taking place within these partnerships. And this will be very, also at methodological level, will be a big help in our opinion for those cities that are involved in these partnerships. And basically this will be also, in my opinion, a work that will contribute to the, will represent a good basis to help the local authorities in reporting on their voluntary local reviews. So all this, let's say, is done within this this framework. And on top of this, I would like also to mention another important piece of work that is done by the Commission, not directly by my DG, but not directly by DEVCO, but by our colleagues that are working with the GRC, that is the Joint Research Center. And basically they made an handbook on voluntary local review, which provide a set of mixed official and experimental indicators, which allows cities to design and monitor for the local review. And and this is, of course, again in the framework of the monitoring of the SDGs. So I think that all this work is really, let's say, important and as the glue that put together all this intervention. I would like to mention also the very important component that is part of our program, that is the support to the association of local authorities, because we know that of course, especially when we talk about the smaller local authorities, they need support. And basically we are supporting the global associations to support the national association that support the local authorities. So you see, this is a long chain, but basically allows the Commission to reach out to small local authorities. This will not be possibly, will not be possible, let's say, maybe on the field, because there are too many and some are in very remote area, but feeding this long chain basically allows us to reach everywhere. And so I would say that we started this collaboration with the Global Local Authority Association, in particular PLATFORMA is one of these. And this has given really impressive results in terms of empowering these local authorities in the work that they do daily. And I think that is not the case that all the, let's say, the advocacy work that has been done at the H-level policy forum and all the importance that has been given to these local regional authorities is a real achievement of what has been done in the last year. So I think that we have been able really to establish a win-win relationship, and I think that we have been also able to extend this relationship, win-win relationship between national government and local government, because maybe you know well that the Commission is historically working mainly at a national level with government. We have strong relation with all government in the world, especially for international cooperation. But now in these last years, we are reinforcing our cooperation with the local government. And so basically, I think that the new phase that will come out in 2021 to 2027 will allow us to really reinforce this framework. I think I conclude here, and I thank you again. And of course, I'm ready for any questions you want to do and make to me about some details, let's say.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Thank you for highlighting the great role that the calls that the Commission has launched play and help to encourage local and regional governments and their associations to continue to innovate, to work together, to implement the SDGs across Europe, but also with their peers and partner countries. So it's very important for us that we continue working with the Commission on this. You also mentioned the role of voluntary local reviews, and that's very important for us also. The way they contribute also to national reporting, all of this has been keywords that we've been hearing right now during the whole high-level political forum, VLRs and VNRs. So it's great that you highlighted and gave some more clarity on the interlinkages also and the role that they play. We notably in the PLATFORMA publication, PLATFORMA CEMR publication that came out today, also focused on the role of VLRs. So I invite you to look at page 23 of the publication if you want to find out some more information from our side. But we're also, of course, happy to share the report that has been produced by the Joint Research Center on the chat. It has just been requested, so we gave the link because the handbook for voluntary local reviews from the Commission is a very good and important tool to use as well. So now when we're talking of reports, I'm happy to introduce our next speaker, Edgardo Bielski, who is also going to talk about a very important report that has been launched during the high-level political forum this year. So Edgardo, the Director of Programs and Research of UCLG, a very important partner of ours, has launched a survey with PLATFORMA and CEMR at the beginning of the year that became the basis of the study that we are showing today, but also of the report that UCLG and the Global Task Force presented to the High-Level Political Forum on the localization of the SDGs. So Edgardo, I'm happy to have you here join us today. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about the outcomes, the key recommendations of your report, and what are the trends globally when it comes to SDG localization? The floor is yours, Edgardo.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be again with you and to share this table with all of you. Maybe if you can put on the screen the report. I don't know, I cannot see it yet.
We put up your PowerPoint presentation slides, what you sent us. Is that okay?
Now I see it. Sorry,
yeah?
I cannot see it before. Now I see it. Thank you very much. Then, this, as Sarah mentioned, this is the fourth report that we present to the HLPF. This report is facilitated by UCLG, but it's really the representation, the gathering of all the efforts of the 25 global networks that are members of the Global Task Force at global and regional levels. Really is a very important undertaking because that summarizes all the information that we gather through the surveys, but also through different sources, and we put it together to analyze the 17 SDGs. This is the innovation this year, because the previous years the report was focalizing on the 5 SDGs that were the center of the reporting process. This one, we try to summarize the 70 SDGs where we are. And as it was done in a very difficult context in the framework of the COVID-19, then if we move to the next one, please, you will see, then yes, you will see there more or less the mapping of where the different countries of the world, where local and regional governments are contributing in different ways, both to our report, so the survey that Sarah mentioned before, and we make this effort jointly with PLATFORMA and CEMR for Europe, but for the rest of the world is the Global Task Force that is really mobilizing the networks to collect the information from national local government associations, from cities, regional governments. And we also take advantage of the analyzing of the different BNRs of the different countries. Then you have a feeling with showing this map of what is the level of mobilization of local and regional governments everywhere in the world. Next one, please. Then, what do we need to stress, to underline from our report this year? First of all, that there is a local and regional governments involvement in the BNR process is making progress. For the first time in 5 years, local and regional governments, principally through their associations, participate in 55% of the countries, of the BNRs of countries reporting this year. That's mean 26 BNR from 47 that were presented this year. This slide gives you a feeling what is the process also regarding the weak participation, non-consultation at all, and the evolution between 2016 and 2020. Next one, please. Then, if we can say that we make important progress in the participation of local governments in the BNR's process, we cannot say the same regarding the participation of local governments in the national coordination and follow-up mechanisms that are preparing, making the coordinations of the strategy for the implementation of the SDGs in the different countries. Even this year, it is a slight decline in the local government's involvement in these national coordination mechanisms, in part because we are talking about, in many regions, about very difficult countries where local governments can be sometimes very weak. But the peak was reached in general, the participation is better in Europe than in all the other regions. Nevertheless, there is also an important involvement in national coordination mechanisms in Latin America, followed by Asia Pacific and then Africa. Next one, please. Then, as I mentioned in my previous, in the introduction, this year the report tried to follow the contribution for local and regional governments to the different SDGs, following my previous intervention, the previous intervention of the colleague of UNDESA mentioned, following the approach that the UNDESA defined for the assessment of the HLPF process. That means 4 principal entry points regarding advancing human well-being and ending hunger, urban and peri-urban development, protecting the planet, and sharing economic benefit. We add to this 4 entry thematic approach obviously the debate on the COVID-19 contribution to the HLPF, at global level to face the pandemic. Next one, please. Then, for each of, I will go very quickly for the different dimensions. I see the report make 140 pages. It's a medium regarding the BNR's report. Most of the BNR reports are among 100 and 200 pages, but as you know, the BNRs are only focused on one country. We are talking about the world, the global world. Then we try to summarize, but if of the points you have between 5 and 10 pages regarding the different points. Regarding the COVID-19, we underlined that innovative local and regional governments have developed preemptive response, share different methodologies for sharing information through digital tools, promoted soft urban mobility alternatives, redesigned urban space, encouraged short food circuits to ensure access to food, and putting the protection of the population at the center in order to ensure an inclusive recovery. Regarding urban and peri-urban development, the report points out hundreds of local and regional governments' experience where they are revising their policies and development plans to mainstream the SDGs. And this is a global phenomenon. It's not only located in Europe, but it's in almost all the regions of the world at different pace. Then how local governments are developing innovative policies regarding slum upgrading or retrofitting policies, increasingly making the right to adequate housing as a prominent element of their agendas to face the global crisis on access to housing. Then the provision of access to drinkable water, and as probably you noted, the SDG 6, access to water, is the only one, is one of the few, I will say, SDGs where there is a progress and the possibility to reach the 2030 objective at the end. And we need to underline that often the responsibility to access to water is a local and regional government responsibility. Then you have also a number of local governments that are increasing in implementing sustainable transportation reforms, fostering innovative cultural policies, reducing waste production, promoting recycling and reusing, and making efforts to improve air quality. But nevertheless, this is the innovative, the more advanced of local governments. We will see later that there are a lot of pitfalls that we need to underline also. Regarding well-being, we need to underline the different experiences of local and regional governments trying to contribute to reduce poverty, targeting the people more in need, promoting territorialized food systems, developing localized health and educational policies. Globally, also still insufficient, progress is observed in the participation of women in local political leadership. We need to underline that the participation of women in local governments bodies is even better than at the parliamentary or at the national level. Then different local and regional governments networks are making important initiatives to respect regarding to peace and respect of human rights. You know that many local governments are taking initiative regarding discrimination and welcoming of immigrants, particularly in the European Union, many times against the national policy, the national policies of their governments. Then thousands of local governments are developing participatory approach, participatory budget, participatory planning, etc. Regarding protecting the planet, probably all of you are aware that and the Global Covenant of Mayors play an important role, that more than 10,000 local and regional governments from 135 countries, representing more than 800 million of inhabitants, have committed themselves to take measurable actions to reduce greenhouse emissions. And until 2018, more than almost 9,000 local governments from 55 countries had adopted disaster risk reduction strategies aligned with the Sendai framework. That we see, even if difficult to collect data, in many cases we have gathered data that shows an impressive role of local governments in pushing up these agendas. Regarding sharing economy, all of you know that local governments many times have important roles in local economic development plans. But overall, I would like to stress the role of local governments in creating alternative models like circular economy, sharing and social economy, or promoting tailor-made policies to integrate informal sector in the urban fabric. Next one, please. You hear me? Next slide, please. Then, regarding the pitfalls, the difficulties, the report also underlines the setbacks that local and regional governments face. Structural trends are reshaping the urban landscape with a serious impact on urban management and sustainability. Social fragmentation, economic polarization is growing within cities, between metropolitan areas and intermediate cities, and also between peripheral regions and deserted rural areas. Indeed, the current reality of many cities and regions, particularly in developing countries, is constrained by limited capacities and resources to formulate adequate response to these unsustainable patterns of urbanization. And this is particularly dramatically if you look at that the impact of urban growth in the coming years will be greater than in any previous period of the history regarding the impact on the depletion of the environment and social inequalities. Then there is a real and urgently need to create answers adapted, particularly in the regions where the urban growth will be concentrated, like in sub-Saharan Africa, South and Southeast Asia, to take urgent actions against these trends. Finally, the last slide regarding a few recommendations that we suggest to the UN and to our colleagues and partners. First of all, we still need to strengthen national localization strategies and empower local and regional governments to secure the provision of essential services and trigger structural change by accelerating the achievements of the 2030 agenda. The support and promote the effective implementation and the localization of the SDGs, supported obviously by empowered and well-resourced local and regional governments. We are convinced that without empowered local and regional governments, the achievement of the SDGs will be not accessible. Then strengthen even more local and regional voices in the voluntary national reporting process and in the national coordination mechanisms to achieve a qualitative cliff in SDG implementation. Acknowledge the support and promote bottom-up monitoring and localization indicators fed with disaggregated data. We forget to mention, as Marlène and Sarah mentioned before, you have the BLRs process, more than 45, even now 50 cities and local and regional governments everywhere from the world present BLRs. But the innovative action this year was the development of voluntary subnational reviews in 5 pilot countries. And the good experience is that many of the conclusions of the voluntary subnational review were for the first time integrated in the voluntary national reviews. This is the case of Costa Rica, of Ecuador, of Benin, of Kenya, and at a less extent in Mozambique. And then finally, the need to strengthen the global cooperation through renewed and reinforced multilateral systems. This is our message, and thank you for hearing me. Give me the opportunity to share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edgardo. You managed to summarize 140 pages into these couple of minutes, which is impressive. Thank you. And it's we were really happy on behalf of Platforma and CMR to contribute to this report with you as well. You do feature a European perspective in it, so we were happy to see that. And we will definitely help promote this report because it's worth the read for those who have the time to see the full thing. But in any case, if you agree, we will share the slides that you presented today as well with the participants so that they can see the numbers that you mentioned. So I will definitely share that as a follow-up to this webinar with all of you. So thank you to the 3 first panelists that we had. I also see that an interesting chat is going on the chat right now regarding VLRs. So don't hesitate to look at the links that are being shared there as well. I'm going to move on now to some local and regional examples, actually, on how the SDGs are taking shape, they are coming to life, and how cities, towns, regions, municipalities are working with the 2030 agenda, even though there are some very constraining times at the moment. So I'm very delighted to welcome our first example from the city of Os in the Netherlands, Mayor Wobine Buys-Glaudemans. I hope I'm saying your name correctly also. You made the time in your busy agenda to join us, so thank you so much, Mayor. How has your city been dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, actually, and how has the SDGs and the 2030 agenda helped you better communicate with your citizens and find some solutions to the issues that it raised? I'm delighted to give you the floor for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much. And of course, thank you to Platforma and CEMR for organizing this time, because I think it's very interesting when you are in the middle of a pandemic crisis and everybody's really feeling connected as citizens all over the world, dealing with the same problems at the same time. You feel very connected, and it's very important to keep the SDGs going in a time like this, because what I see around me is people are attending to other things and just focusing on the COVID and start to forget about the rest of the problems. And we really need to find each other back on the level of the SDGs. My city of Os is actually very hard hit in our country. It was the basic territory where COVID hit. And when I look at the SDGs, there are several questions coming to my mind. And of course, number one is why, and that's the quality of life. We have some circumstances. Our spring holiday was early this year. We were the first in the country to have the holiday, and a lot of people went skiing in Italy, and maybe they brought it back and we didn't have protective measures yet. But at the same time, we have a big agricultural economy, and we have pollution in the air, and we had our local carnival where people keep hugging each other for 3 days. So it might also have been one of the reasons for spreading the disease so enormously. And looking at this and looking at the UN, I'm very interested in not only a local research about what happened, but also worldwide research about the centers of the outbreak, what happened there, but is there also some linkage to the quality of life? So I think that's one of the things where we can use the SDGs to, especially maybe the planet, but also how does community work? But the second, of course, is how to build back better. I think that's one of the big things we need to do. And being from Holland, the Netherlands, that means that we need to keep on working on lowering our footprint. And we need to reform our consumption and production patterns. And we notice that the goods from China, the foods from all over the world, the logistical chains were stagnating. And it brought us back to our regional food chains. And that's interesting. And it was on a small level, but I think there might be something to work that out. Looking at our economic driver is agricultural produce. And one of the things that we need to do is put SDG 2, 12, and 13 together again. No hunger. We need to keep on producing, but we need to recycle, and we need to also work on the climate. And I was very much, I totally agree with Astra Bonini that we need to combine the SDGs to really make an impact. What I notice in families in my town is that COVID has brought a lot of more family time. And that is something that's highly appreciated because people have been busy all the time, every hour of the day. And there was a lot of stress going on. And everybody was happy that there was so less stress, there were less commuting hours. And how can we keep this up? How can we go on with more flexibility in office hours, digital meetings? I mean, we see it here today, and I was also very impressed about what Astra Bonini said about the 180 experts that they spoke to get the 10 to 15 pages about building back better, how easy it is to connect digitally or virtually all over the world. And what can we do with this? And of course, I would have loved to see all of you in New York, but at the same time, looking at the footprint, maybe something is going on here that we somehow need to hold on to. As a government, of course, I'm very busy with implementing the SDGs and using them to build back better. But I see I'm not doing it alone. I noticed that there's a natural behavior of my citizens in realizing that they've been overstressed and that they need to go back to a better life somehow, more quality and less more, but better. What I see in their behavior is people don't take vacations this year, and they're working on their home, they're working on the neighborhood. So they're actually implementing building in their homes, and there are sources like solar panels. They work in their yard to do better water management. What I see is people look after each other again. A neighborhood is actually becoming a neighborhood again. And I notice bikes are back. and during my lifetime, I've seen bikes disappear from the streets. And I've seen that in Vietnam, I've seen it in China. Bikes are gone. Everything is motorized. And of course, time, it's terrible for the environment. So we as a government need to invest in good biking roads and know that even if you have an electric bike, you'll get people out of the car. The commuter distance is usually in Holland, and we're flat, 7 kilometers. And when you have an electrical bike, it will go to 17 kilometers. So if I can get all those people on the bike, I can get rid of of rush hour, and maybe the ministry can tax rush hour, or so we don't need to build more roads. In the Netherlands, we talk about global goals when we talk about the SDGs, and I think what the last period of time learned us is that, of course, they're global goals. We wish them everybody in the entire world, but they need to be taken on as a local responsibility. And by calling them global goals, it's something like it's far away. It's not mine. And it is your local responsibility. And it gives a very nice framework. I'm in Holland, mayors are not politically inclined. So I have to be above the political parties. And for me, they give a real nice framework, totally apolitical. And no matter what party is reigning, this time we work on the planet, next time we work on the families, then we have the social agenda, but they're all in the global goals. And so we, like a boat, a sailing boat, you cross towards the future. And I think that's a nice framework. When I look at the structure in Holland, we have the Association of the Netherlands. They of course help, and I just learned about the Met of Amsterdam, and they use the donut model to build back better. And I think it's a very interesting way. It's a model from Oxford, which represents a total new perspective on economic growth using the SDGs. So I will put later on, I'll put the link on the chat. And I'm very happy about receiving all the links. I've been downloading them during this webinar. So I will have a wonderful weekend with all the exchange of the knowledge that I got from all over the world. But I really want to thank you. And what I would like to say is we are trying, we are committed, and yeah, let's keep in touch and join in getting the SDGs as a centerpiece in building back better. I think that's the best way to go. So it's nice meeting you, and thanks again for organizing this wonderful webinar.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you for your kind words and for your inspiring stories. The city of Os is notably featured in our publication. I don't know if you've seen that yet, but we have put a small box as a good practice, because what you've done is really amazing. You put the people back at the center, which is the whole point of the Agenda 2030, and that we tend to forget. We think about green, we think about economy, but we need to put the people first. So as you mentioned, the whole COVID-19 crisis has somehow done that also a little bit. And your initiatives also that can be replicated have helped to encourage that more. So that's great. Feel free to add any links you wish also in the chat if you want to share more.
Thank you.
We're going to move now next to a neighbor of the Netherlands, so Belgium in Flanders, to the second youngest councillor of Kortrijk, if I pronounced that city correctly.
Yeah, that's correct.
Tine Soens. Thank you so much, Tine, for joining us today. You are also a member of the Association of the Flemish Cities and Municipalities, so VVSG, the Political Commission on International Affairs, and also PLATFORMA and CEMR's spokesperson for the 2030 Agenda. So you're very active, so thank you for joining us. How has the city of Kortrijk been working with the 2030 Agenda, and how have you managed to raise awareness also to your citizens? We were talking about the people. What about your perspective on development education to achieve the SDGs? The floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. Last week at the HLPF in the session on bolstering local action to control the pandemic, a representative from the delegation of Afghanistan, I think, mentioned that we don't need a new recovery plan for COVID-19. We actually already have the blueprint to respond to the crisis and its aftermath. We have Agenda 2030 and the 17 SDGs. In order to make full use of the opportunities and potential provided by Agenda 2030, I want to highlight two important requirements. First of all, it's mentioned before, SDG 17 on partnerships has to be put at the forefront. Astra Bonini talked about this already, but all too often a sectoral approach to tackling COVID-19 has predominated. This in a time when the interlinkages and trade-offs between the SDGs are very clear. How do we protect human life while at the same time keeping our economy going, protecting our green spaces, avoiding increases in single-use materials, all taking into account the most vulnerable groups? And I think the only way forward is a cross-disciplinary approach with cooperation between departments and partnerships within and between countries. Secondly, in order to implement the agenda, you have to know the agenda, of course. Although more and more local governments, organizations, and citizens know the SDGs, we need to keep investing in awareness raising and creating broad-based support. This can be done internally within the local government, of course, but also externally within the municipality and, of course, internationally. And I will provide some Flemish examples on each of these three levels, and also showing the connection between awareness raising and integrating the SDGs into policy planning. First of all, awareness raising on the SDGs within local government is an essential step in any local SDG approach. You need political and administrative leadership. You need to have the different departments on board to implement activities in a sustainable way. Many Flemish municipalities have used the circle exercise of VVSG. This exercise is a tool to map existing policy and activities to the SDGs. What are we already doing that contributes to the 17 goals? In the second step, you look at the gaps. Which SDGs are we not or are we barely tackling? And should and can we tackle this? And the exercise is a good way for staff to get to know the SDGs in relation to their municipality, but is also used to think about activities for future policy. And I'm proud to say that this year, 60% of all municipalities in Flanders have used the SDGs in their new multi-annual policy plans, and my hometown Kortrijk did that as well. Secondly, Flemish municipalities are also raising awareness towards stakeholders and citizens. In the city of Harelbeke, a neighboring city, for example, the SDGs are part of citizen participation to develop their new multi-annual policy plan. And each consultation moment was based on some SDGs. The participants were asked which SDGs they deemed most important for the city to work on. And lastly, SDGs can also be part of international networks and partnerships. The city of Bruges, for example, recently embarked on a partnership with Eboloa in Cameroon. And during the original mission in Eboloa, priorities and strengths and weaknesses of each city were discussed based on the SDGs. This contributed to defining the main themes for the partnership based on the common language of the agenda. The exercise also helped in getting the different departments of Eboloa acquainted with the SDGs. And to end my presentation, I would like to elaborate some more on the week of the sustainable municipality. It's an action of VVSG that works on the internal, external, and international component of awareness raising. The campaign is already organized for the third time this year, and it will take place from the 18th to the 25th of September. Last year, 1 out of 3 Flemish municipalities participated, and we hope, of course, to reach the same number this year. During that week of the sustainable municipality, municipalities celebrate local heroes for global goals. And this year, of course, the focus will be on COVID-19 heroes. These are citizens, organizations, schools, businesses, or government departments who have taken sustainable initiatives the last couple of months, preferably with a longer lasting effect. Through these heroes and communication during the campaign week, local governments raise awareness on the SDGs within their municipality, with the public, the politicians, and within, of course, also the administration. And further, since most municipalities involve multiple departments in the selection of those local heroes, internal awareness is strengthened. And this year, we also raised the SDG flag on the 25th of September to celebrate the 5th anniversary of Agenda 2030. We do this together with our colleagues in the Netherlands, and VVSG also encourages Flemish municipalities to raise the flag together with their sister cities in Europe and across the world. And of course, we hope local governments in your countries will join us in this celebration. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Tine. You have so many great examples. VVSG has a handbook full of good advice and tools to use. And I know that your colleague Hanne posted the links on the chat right now. So yes, of course, your week of the sustainable municipality is amazing. It's really impressive when you see the pictures with all these flags. So we'll be watching out for it this year, of course, as well. On Platforma's side, we also will be having the week, a week dedicated to awareness raising, which is actually the European Days of Local Solidarity, where we want to raise awareness on development education also across the world, bringing citizens also back into the conversation. So this will take place between the 14th and the 29th of November this year. And we will be happy to, of course, highlight again what VVSG and the Dutch municipalities have been doing, and anyone else who's wished to join the movement during that week as well. So I'm going to move on now to Milena Radomirovic, all the way from Serbia. So we're going a little bit more east this time, to invite you to tell your story as well. You're representing the Standing Committee of the Standing Conference of Towns and Municipalities in Serbia, and you're Program Director for Planning and Public Finance. So thank you for joining us, Milena. It's great to have you here as always. In your experience, can you briefly give us your perspective on the role of a national association? Because we've been talking about cities and now we're going to move on to the role of the National Association on helping your members achieve the SDGs, and how do you work also with the national government in this sense? So if you can have 5 minutes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to all the previous speakers for really providing excellent examples to which we're obviously we will have to look at, having in mind that basically I don't know if the situation is more or less the same, and if I'm speaking on behalf of the Western Balkans more or less, but based on our experiences, somehow developments have been a little delayed compared to the very launching of the agenda and entry into force of the SDGs as of 2016. So this is basically some genesis of and the evolution of the process in our case that I'm going to present, where we are basically in these couple of last years trying to catch up more with the more advanced countries worldwide also. So in our case, basically, since 2016, we as the Association of Towns and Municipalities in Serbia were, of course, involved and aware of the efforts of the government to firstly embrace and then translate the SDGs and their incorporation into the national framework. Nevertheless, it was only with the preparation of first national voluntary report for 2019 that actually the intergovernmental unit and the minister in charge of agenda in our case had basically opened the dialogue more towards local self-governments. We were then at that point as the association included, our representative actually included into this intergovernmental working group where we could actually draw attention to the importance of localization of SDGs and the importance of having the local perspective in achieving the SDGs. This proved to be a really important point somewhere towards the end of 2018 and through 2019, that basically through the entire first voluntary national report for 2019, presented in 2019, we had managed to incorporate a layer for each of the SDGs and their sub targets we managed to incorporate the local perspective and basically to present how this translates into at the local level. So following this, basically, I think also our national government recognized the potential of our association and the importance of having local self-governments at all times on board for SDGs. So we were jointly carrying out several events, some of them regional, some of them national, but all intended for the LSGs and basically for raising awareness on the Agenda 2030 and the localization of SDGs. This proved to be even more important with the view of the fact that Serbia, the government actually decided not to make a prioritization of SDGs or a nationalization of SDGs, but to let LSGs do their own prioritization and localization of SDGs. So this needed to be explained, which is why it was really important that we had support by our international partners, development cooperation partners. In the first row, this was the GIZ, then also Swiss Confederation came into the picture as well, while at all times there were the EU projects combined with this. So we jointly organized these events through 2019. We continued in 2020, firstly in terms of physical meetings, then we also continued online, whereby our objectives were several. So these were events organized jointly between the intergovernmental group, the line minister in charge for the agenda, then also our statistical office, the government office for cooperation with civil society, and the national association. So it was really important for us to prove that we are working together on the side of government as well as on the side of local self-governments, and to indicate to LSGs that they will have support throughout the whole process, and at least to have guidance in how to understand the agenda and the SDGs. So the cooperation was in focus, and even more so because we needed to explain to LSGs what kind of expectations there are on behalf of government in terms of reporting and in terms of whether this new agenda will or will not represent an additional work and additional requirements to already stretched capacities in LSGs. So these were some of the key messages where we really promoted the approach of having the Agenda 2030 as a global agenda integrated into national strategic framework and national development objectives. Where we also needed to combine all this with the EU perspective and the fact that we are basically a candidate country for the membership, and that we need to pursue the objectives from certain or all negotiation chapters. So in order to do so, and this is the last point I would like to highlight, in addition to this cooperation framework and the awareness raising, was a good circumstance in our case that basically the whole planning system began to be reorganized and reformed with the adoption of the new law of planning system. This means that basically some new elements have been brought, but for the first time legalized, or to say formalized by means of a law in the planning system of Serbia. Imposing also certain expectations on local self-governments on how to prepare each of them one local development plan, overarching the planning document that would then be maybe concretized by sectoral planning documents, and of course by the budget. So we used the opportunity, again in cooperation with the government, this time with the Public Policy Secretariat, to develop guidelines for preparation of these local development plans, where we actually incorporated the SDGs as an inevitable part of preparation of these plans. Meaning that when local self-government is thinking of their local priorities and of their prioritization, they also need to think with which SDG or sub-targets this fits the most. So these guidelines have been published only recently, this June, and we then now need to pursue further their implementation. With the COVID, we see changing the environment a little bit, very challenging in terms of participatory approach that we are promoting, but again, maybe helpful in terms of focusing the priorities to what LSGs need the most. So yeah, this has been my intervention. These guidelines that I have mentioned, they are only in Serbian, but in any case, if any of colleagues from other associations would be interested, we can discuss about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Milena. It's amazing how well you've managed to create this relationship with your national government and together with your members for a very effective SDG localization. So great examples to replicate, and we'll be happy to share any links you have also with the participants and our members. I'm going to excuse for a moment already the next speaker who was supposed to come, the mayor of Soria, Mr. Carlos Martinez Minguez. We were just informed that he will not be able to join us because the king and the queen of Spain is actually visiting his city right now. So I believe that's a very valid excuse. And we would have really loved to have him as always, but we will make sure that he'll get his intervention next time. He really would have loved to talk about the importance of education for the global citizenship, which is actually a movement in Spain, the Educación para la Ciudadanía Global, as an accelerator of the localization of the SDGs. And through that, actually, FEMP arranged an agreement with the government to promote this kind of cooperation run by local governments. So it's a really interesting examples that we would have loved to hear about. But my colleague Mercedes Sanchez, who's joining us today in the room of participants, is available to answer any questions that you have, and we can share more information on this great experience also with you following the webinar. So sorry about that, and thank you to Mercedes in advance for joining us, even though you're quite busy also today. I'm going to give the floor very briefly, if still possible, to Simone Giovetti from Cité Unifrance for a few minutes, if possible, on your side. On some great examples that you have on decentralized cooperation and the SDGs. And then after, we may move to some question and answers, even though we're running over time. If those of you who are joining us today would still have 5 minutes extra to stay on board to join for that Q&A, we will be running a little bit over time, but it's for a good cause. So thank you, and thank you, Simone, for joining us.
Okay. Can you hear me
yes.
well?
Yes, very well.
Thank you. So I will be very briefly. Thank you for this opportunity just to share the particular case of our network, that is a French network of local authority engaged on decentralized cooperation. We thought that there was a need of to implement the SDGs metrics on the decentralized cooperation, city-to-city cooperation. We saw a little bit delay of French local authorities on SDGs, doing also by the fact that in France, the Agenda 21 precedes the SDGs actually. So there was a different kind of reference that was shared with the local authorities. Now that there are SDGs, we need to, local authorities need to readapt this, those new development goals that are presented in a different way, but we are doing our best to to share the goals. And particularly on decentralized cooperation, we are working also with the USCLG and the platform actually on developing the learning module number 4, that is ones that completely dedicated to this question. So we work with 3-4 French pilot local authorities working with their partners in 3 different continents. And we would like to, by the end of the middle of the next year, to have a new tools that will allow all French local authorities with their partners around the world to read the centralized cooperation with the lens of SDGs, to help them also to evaluate their own cooperation on the achievement of those SDGs. So it's not just flagging a cooperation with SDGs goals, I'm ending, but also try to really think the centralized cooperation using the SDGs metrics.
Simone?
Yeah.
Is it possible to put your camera on? The interpreters just are asking. It will be helpful for them to see you if it's okay.
Yes,
Perfect. Sorry. It's great to see you, by the way.
I'm using my, thank you. I'm using my
No problem.
phone, so I was worrying about. But yes, basically is the presentation what I just shared with you as an example of on how to implement the SDG localization through cooperation and what we are doing as a French network of local authorities.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Simone. You have great examples as well. And yes, thank you for talking about the training module number 4 that will come out by the end of this year on the link between SDGs and decentralized cooperation. And if anyone wants to already find out more about it, let us know. We'll be happy because we're still in the phase of developing it. So it's still a new exercise, and we're happy to receive your inputs in advance on this. So now I am happy to open the floor to all of those of you who have surely pressing questions to our wonderful speakers. I've noted some questions already in the chat, but if anyone else wishes to take the floor, they just have to raise their virtual hand. Let us know. And if you have an issue with that, then just ask it in the chat and we'll be happy to do that. Please be very brief with your questions and your intervention. As you've seen, we're running short in time, but we're trying to give as much opportunities to speak to all those who are here. So happy to have you. I'm just going to look for the question that was raised by Mr. Carl Wright, unless, Carl, you wish to quickly ask it yourself to, believe it was Paolo?
Okay,
yeah?
Hi everybody, thanks.
Hi.
Yeah, hi Paolo, and really just a very quick question, or not a quick one, but a complicated one. Given the emphasis the Commission President has placed on green recovery and on climate action and post-COVID recovery, and Edgardo, of course, also mentioned the importance of so many local governments taking up the issue of a green-led economic recovery post-COVID. How far is it possible to deploy future development funds under the DICI for climate action? And does the current programming mechanism actually allow any earmarking of funds for climate action and post-COVID green-led recovery in partner countries? Thanks.
Yes. Can I answer or we go for more questions?
No, go ahead, Paolo. I think since it's a bit complex, we'll let you look at that.
Okay. So first of all, I am very happy to see Carl after some months of this lockdown. At least we meet virtually. So the question is basically, I would say that we are in the phase of programming the next financial framework, next 7 years. So nothing has been yet decided because there is still discussion between the Commission, the European Council and European Parliament. But I think that it's very likely there will be earmarking of actions that are, let's say, targeting climate change. On top of this, we will have, for this program, 7-year programs, we will have 5 priorities. And the first one is the Green Deal. That means that both in the EU and in our international cooperation, any action that is closely linked to the Green Deal will be, of course, considered a priority. And then we have many tools to make sure that we are, let's say, really focusing on this and consistent with our policies. Because also, for example, when we talk about the promotion of investment, we are looking at basically putting in place mechanisms that will allow us only to finance and let's say contribute to the financing of investments that are green. That means that we are not, for example, when we talk about energy, we don't want anything to do with the fossil fuel energy, but we are only going for renewable energy. And when we go for transport, we are looking at the greening of the transport and things like that. So basically, we are putting in place a strong policy in which not only we are looking more specifically on issues that are really strictly related to the biodiversity, environment, and things like that, but also in our usual cooperation and our usual, let's say, investments, we are looking at the green aspect. Not only the Commission, but also the European Investment Bank is really working on putting this together. And also our colleagues from the line DGs are really, everybody is working for this. And of course, what we are going to do as a clear, let's say, influence of what we do at local level, because it's clear that also at local level, we are using exactly the same criteria. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paolo. I hope that helped answer your question, Carl. I can see you're satisfied. Great. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions or comments, reactions to the great examples that we've been hearing from our speakers today? Or if anyone wishes to complement what they have already said? If not, don't hesitate also to write to Platforma and to the Secretariat if anything pops up in your mind later this evening or tomorrow, you never know. We'll be happy to continue answering your questions and conversing with you on this. This is, as Marlène mentioned, one of the core work of Platforma and of our partners, so we're going to continue our efforts. So I guess if we don't have any other comments, I will actually be able maybe to conclude on time, and we will be able to finish on time this webinar. Thank you first, of course, to all the speakers again who joined us from across all over the world. Thank you to Astra. I hope you're still with us, even though the connection was a bit rusty at some point. And thank you to colleagues from the Netherlands, from the European Commission. I don't know if you're in Belgium right now, Paolo, or if you're in Italy right now, but wherever you are, thank you for joining us. Thank you also to Flanders, to Spain, to Mercedes, even though the mayor couldn't make it today, to Cité Unie France. Really, we had a very diverse list of panelists, and the exchange that we have together today strengthened the statement that the achievement of the SDGs has to be done actually from the bottom up and depends actually on the full ownership of communities, cities, and regions. So all SDGs, as we know, have a territorial dimension and depend on the place where they are implemented. So all of these concrete local examples are very helpful for us. The 2030 agenda is an opportunity to reinforce the transversal, multi-level, and multi-sectoral dimension of territorial development agendas through the coherent integration of different policies, such as, for instance, social cohesion, education, health, of course, right now has become very important. Climate change, as mentioned also by Paolo right now, culture is very important. So all of these successful, sustainable local development requires actually effective local and regional governments and governance, including real public participation. So as we had also touched upon, involving citizens will be crucial, making sure that citizens are at the heart of the policy making and planning to achieve and to continue the progress that local and regional governments have been making on the SDGs. Through our studies, research, and through all the work that Platforma and CMR have been doing together with our partners, we have identified a set of 5 key recommendations. They're featured in our SDG position paper, but also in our publication that has been launched today, and through all the messages that we continue to share. So basically, it is very much connected to what Edgardo was mentioning as well. For us, what is key is to really promote multi-level and multi-stakeholder partnerships, to put the local level and the regional level at the decision-making table with all the other stakeholders, So to have increased support and acknowledgement of the role that they play by the national governments, but also by the EU and by the international community, to continue supporting the work that the local and regional governments are doing by increasing resources, also financial, but human capacity is very key, to make the most of awareness-raising tools, as we have seen, and of course to provide relevant information to make sure that they're aware of what's going on to the local and regional level, so that they can continue making progress, monitoring their own progress, including reporting at the local level. So we're happy to finalize and conclude with 1 minute delay this wonderful webinar. I'm very happy to have you all join us today, even though, as we mentioned, it was the middle of summer, in the middle of July. So I'm very delighted to see that you all took your time to be here today. We will be sharing all of this information with you in a follow-up shortly. This webinar has been recorded and will be also uploaded on our Platforma YouTube channel. So you can listen to it if you've missed out anything or share it with your colleagues. And so for now, all I'm going to say is that I'm going to wish you a happy afternoon, a happy and healthy summer to come, and to see you soon again, wherever you may be. So thank you all, and bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Sarah.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Salut Sarah.
Merci beaucoup à tous.